One. Hey, and welcome back. We got our man TDA Alex with us to do the NFL recap and review for Week 4. Alex,
What's up, buddy? How's it going?
it's going pretty good. Pretty fun Week 4, or I don't know about fun, but interesting week, and stories seem to be pouring out the more we get deeper into the week leading into Week 5.
Yeah, it was a wild week.
All right, so let's get into our top stories.
Now this made headlines.
All right, so the first thing we probably should break down is the Houston Texans fired Bill O'Brien this weekend after a 0-4 start. I don't know if it's shocking, but I don't totally understand it. If you were like ready to fire the coach 4 games into the season, why did you let him make, off-season moves all off-season if you're sitting there ready for him to be fired? It seems a little weird, but I mean, you could probably see it coming considering he was on the hot seat the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those scenarios where having the coach also operate as the GM isn't really good for the team in the long run. There were those reports that came out about the coach, Bill O'Brien and J.J. Watt, kind of getting into it after the game, and that was right before they let him go. I personally kind of saw this coming. This was a game that they should have won. We've talked about it extensively throughout the season that they had really bad luck when it came to the scheduling. So the first couple of games, them losing those games, we kind of expected that. But going into this week against the Vikings, you really thought that they should have won this game, and they would have at least somewhat stayed in contention within the division. But losing, I think, is what really caused Bill O'Brien to get fired.
Yeah, 0-4 is just probably not acceptable, though, really, if you look at the schedule. I mean, other than the Vikings game, which is a road game in Minnesota, it just seems weird that you let him go through the whole offseason, make the ridiculous DeAndre Hopkins trade, sign, all those receivers that are now essentially doing nothing. Brandon Cooks, who, I think that was like his 8th concussion he had last year with LA, and you bring him in for nothing.
Yeah, it was an interesting offseason. They made some moves. Obviously, they had to get some weapons on offense after letting DeAndre Johnson go.
Yeah, the only thing is, I guess they're in a full rebuild. It's Hopkins, but it's okay. I think you
DeAndre Hopkins.
You merged Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins into one super receiver.
you think of receivers in Houston, and I mean, to be fair.
Yeah, I know. The problem is, I don't know if they have a way to rebuild. Going back 2 years, letting Bill O'Brien make that Lampsey Tunstall trade. Essentially, they gave up their first-round pick this year and the one that's upcoming with their second-round pick. They have no real cap space due to signing Tunstall and Washington and J.J. Watt and Merciless, and that was the reasons for letting Clowney and technically Hopkins, go. It just seems like they're in a pretty bad spot, and I don't know how they rebuild this. It's at least now 2 years before they can really even start to add young players into the mix without any draft picks this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest part is definitely going to be, was the coaching that big of a deal when it comes to their record? Because if they can start winning games now with Roman Cornell as the interim coach, if they can start winning games, they've got some really good pieces in place. And if they are a better team than what they've shown so far, then they might be okay in the long run until they can start getting some more draft picks and some more money in their salary cap. But I think the rest of the season is going to be very telling as far as what happens to Houston from this point on.
Yeah. Do you see any way you think they could get to 8-8?
I'd like to say that they have a shot, but I don't see 8-8, not after losing 4.
Well, I watched that Vikings game probably about 2 hours ago, and their offense really looks bad, which is possibly some of the reason O'Brien went. He was calling plays, and they just Watson didn't look good. He might show up later on my worst list, and I just don't. The defense has been really actually bad for about 2 years now, so I just don't know if they can bring themselves back. I'm sure getting O'Brien out of there from some of the stories that are leaking out now might, help team morale, but I think it'll be a struggle.
Hey, if they can somehow fuse receivers into DeAndre Johnson, they'll be fine.
Well, that's true. The one who comes out good in this is probably the Miami Dolphins, who now have the Texans' first and second round pick.
Yeah, that worked out, didn't it?
So, I mean, they're probably going to have 2 picks inside the top 10 and 2 picks inside the second round top 10 as well. So they look to be building for the future. I don't know about the Texans. Anything else on the Texans?
Romeo Crennel, he's a defensive-minded coach, and really that's been one of the parts that I think needed the most help. We don't know how much of an influence Bill O'Brien actually had, but it's interesting to see what they do going forward in the season, like I said, and that'll be telling as far as the next couple of seasons what they can expect.
Yeah. Let's just touch on the game overall. The Vikings seem to be getting a little better, judging from last week's game. Their offense looked better, and it looked even better this week. The defense still, I think, is a little bit of a question mark. The Texans were on the 2-yard line to tie that game before they called some just ridiculous plays. But what do you think of the Vikings? Chance to throw themselves in the playoff mix, or you think they're going to sort of be like this all year, beat bad teams, lose to good?
And that's the thing is, I don't really know how bad Houston really is. It's really hard for me to gauge the Vikings. They're one of those teams, and there's a couple of them this season with that tend to start kind of shocking me a little bit and make me think that they've turned it around. And then before you know it, they throw up a stinker. And I think they're one of those teams that will mess with our heads by playing enough good games that we think they're decent. And then we take them and they come back and bite us in the butt.
Yeah. If I gave you Arizona or Minnesota, who do you think better team there?
Arizona.
All right. So I think that's enough for that game and Bill O'Brien's career. We'll see where he ends up, either getting another coaching job in the NFL. I think he might move to college. But let's move on to our COVID segment for the week. Tennessee had 2 more guys test positive. Apparently they were, for some reason, deciding it was a good idea to practice at some high school during the week. I'm assuming this game coming up is probably going to end up getting axed. I don't know. What do you think?
The interesting thing now is that they have already had 1 game postponed. And how many games is the NFL ready to postpone before it becomes a serious issue for the entire league overall? That's the question that's most concerning to me about this. As far as them having those extra training practices sessions that the NFL wasn't aware of, pretty silly of them, especially in today's COVID-19 world. But it's just an unfortunate situation that they're in. They just keep getting more and more positive results, and I don't know what to make of it going forward.
The mixing this in, they forced, I didn't like it, but they forced that Kansas City Chiefs game versus New England to be played on Monday. And I was just like, why not postpone that? And it goes to a bigger question. Why didn't they had all summer to set the schedule where they could put in bye weeks specifically for everybody to, have games where they can cancel it. Cause now they're, Stephon Gilmore tested positive. There are pictures of him, hugging Patrick Mahomes. And if you start having the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Titans all, kicking up with positive tests, you can't just move all those games. And they haven't built themselves in a buffer unless they're going to start now.
They said that prior to the season, they had kind of worked up a plan in case something like this happened. I don't think that these are scenarios that you can plan out for. It's just kind of coming from everywhere. And like you said, that picture of Gilmore and Mahomes hugging, that's the golden boy right now in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes. If he goes down with it, who's to say what's going to happen with the rest of the season?
Yeah, getting probably scarier by the week. I'm starting to get a little nervous if we're going to be able to finish out the season, on schedule. But hopefully we can get some control and maybe some protocols. Baseball, started out a little sloppy, and they seem to have been able to get it together. So hopefully the NFL can get it together and we can continue and not have to make up podcasts during the week without any content.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's for the spring and summer. All right. So anything else you wanted to touch on Titans, New England COVID positive tests?
Just the one Las Vegas Raider player that tested positive. I don't believe that he was part of the main roster at the time when he tested. So I think that they're kind of going forward as if it's not really affected anything. So we'll see what happens there.
All right. We're at the quarter pole. So my last top story of the week is I wanted you to sort of pick your best, the teams you thought were going to be, contenders for the Super Bowl in both the NFC and the AFC, and then probably just give a couple list of our most disappointing teams so far at the quarter pole. Let's start with the NFC. My number one team right now for the NFC is definitely the Packers. I think the Seahawks are probably slightly behind, but I just see a little more defense with the Packers, a little actually more offensive diversity. They can run, they can pass. But right now the Seahawks look like they're just, totally pass first, and that defense gives me a little problems. What do you think? What are your NFC contenders right now?
I can see where you're coming from with that argument. I actually think Seattle is the top contender right now, with Green Bay just slightly behind them. I think that Seattle has probably a better defense when it comes to playmakers, just the ability to make some big defensive plays when it matters. As of right now, obviously Seattle is missing their big safety acquisition from the offseason.
Yeah.
But as soon as he gets back, I mean, he's a game changer. And
I'll be curious what the team looks like when he gets back, if that defense starts to come around a little bit.
Yeah, and like I said, I have him pretty close. I just think that at the end of the season, if stays healthy on both teams, I think Seattle is slightly better than Green Bay. But I have Seattle and in first place, Green Bay in second. Surprisingly, I still think they could turn it around. And I have New Orleans in third. And then obviously I have a couple other teams that could be contending for that fourth spot, like the Rams, Tampa Bay, and even Chicago if they play like they did last week.
Yeah, I had Saints Rams sort of next in the tier there. I think the Saints will probably, start to push forward. I like the way they look this week now. Granted, it was versus our lovely Lions, who are becoming our team of the year for us. The Rams I'll probably get to later. I was a little disappointed with the game this week, but I thought it might just be a little bit of a lot of travel the last 4 weeks, but the offense was a little disappointing, but we'll touch on that a little later.
Oh yeah. I'll definitely get to my analysis on that game in a little bit.
It was a hard watch, I'll tell you that. For the AFC, I Kansas City easily on top. And then I had like 2 tiers left. I sort of have the Bills, and then I have Ravens, Steelers next to them. And then in sort of I don't know what to make of them tier, the Titans, Colts, and Pats. So I think there are there's the Chiefs way up there. And then I think there's probably about 6 other teams that could fall anywhere. But with each passing week, I think the Bills sort of are starting to separate themselves a little bit. And I actually think they might be a little better than the Ravens right now.
Yeah, I have Kansas City obviously as my top team. They're still the cream of the crop when it comes to the AFC and possibly the entire NFL. Um, I my list originally had Baltimore in second. Um, I still think they're a really good team. They did take a big loss and they looked pretty bad against Kansas City, but most teams that played Kansas City looked pretty bad. So I had them at number two. And originally, when I made my list, I had the Steelers at number three, uh, just because I'm really high on them this season. I've talked about it continuously, but I swapped them out. I actually put Buffalo up on third. Um, they've been playing really good. Josh Allen has looked a lot better as the season progresses. He's making good decisions. He's quick on his feet. Um, I like what Buffalo's showing, so I had them as my number third. And as it gets lower, I actually have a few teams, but from all those other teams that could have taken that fourth spot, I ended up with the Colts just because of that defense.
Yeah, the Colts are starting to weave their way into an upper echelon. I'm still struggling to understand the week one loss to the Jags. I think I'll probably struggle with that in my head for the rest of time. But I really like the way the Colts have looked the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the offense keeps playing smart and Rivers doesn't play like Rivers that we're used to, they have a really good shot of being a good team. They have the defense for it. So we've seen it before. Teams with really good defenses and okay play at quarterback winning the Super Bowl.
Okay, so I think we have our, NFC, AFC best so far. Pretty soft list. We'll see how the season breaks with injuries. I mean, I had to push the Pats far down there because without Cam Newton, I mean, you saw that offense is just dreadful.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. I just had them in my honorable mentions section.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to our most disappointing team. I think we touched on Houston at the top. I'm assuming we both sort of had them somewhere in there. Houston definitely, but the two I thought were the most disappointing are Dallas and Atlanta. Bad defense probably is the reason, but Dallas should. It's just disturbing that they are really a 1-3 team, and really they should be 0-4 if the Falcons don't totally melt. And with as much talent as they have, at least on the offensive side, it's just disappointing, especially the way they got just shellacked versus Cleveland this week.
Yeah, I broke down the most disappointing teams the same way we did the quarters quarter column thing.
Yes.
I broke it down to NFC, AFC, and in the NFC, I had also the Cowboys and the Falcons. Both teams, really potent offenses, and the defense just so bad. The teams have been shocking, but the Cowboys, I had them tied, and the more I thought about it, I had to move the Cowboys up as like my most disappointing one. Just a lot of people predicted that they had a shot of going to the Super Bowl this season, which if you would have asked me prior to the season starting, I probably would have said no, but I wouldn't have thought it was far-fetched.
I think starting the season, they were definitely like a tier 2 team. You probably had, your upper echelon, but ones who could break through. I think Dallas probably was on pretty much everybody's list. Now, in hindsight, looking at that defense, it probably was ridiculous, but it's just amazing. Literally, they are going to have to probably score 40 points every game to even be in contention to win a game.
What happens when your offense just has a off night? You know what I mean? You can't depend on solely just offense to win games in the NFL nowadays. It takes a little bit of both. They're really bad team, unfortunately, especially defensively. The offense just can't make up for it. And like you said, if it wasn't for an onside kick, they're 0-4.
Yeah. So what did you have in the AFC? Houston, I assume, was probably somewhere in there.
Yeah, I had Houston. Originally, I had them up there as the most disappointing ones. But because of the strength of schedule that we talked about, I just kind of moved them down. But I have the Jets as the most disappointing team in the AFC. Just you expected at least a little bit of an improvement from last season, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, I saw that, but I just was like, that team's so sad. I can't even put them in most disappointing because I think they're just a terrible football team. And I struggle to see how they're going to win games. And now we're going to get a little bit of a Joe Flacco experience, which might just somehow make them even worse.
I think it'll slightly improve them ever so slightly, though.
Are you that down on Darnold right now?
I'm just down on the whole team as a unit. Like I just don't think they were all meshing to show any type of improvement, because any team, doesn't matter how bad they are, as the season progresses, you see some improvement. And I just didn't see it from them. And I felt like there was no meshing going on there, which leads to them not improving even the slightest.
Yeah, I agree. I easily could have put them on most disappointing, but I just had them as so bad that they don't even deserve most disappointing.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. They're really bad. But like I said, I just expected at this point in the season they'd at least have one win.
Yeah. All right, so that was our top stories for the week. Let's move down and break down last week's week 4 games. All right, so Thursday night, speaking of your New York Jets, they went down to the Denver Broncos 37-28. Don't have much to break down. I think we touched on it on Saturday's podcast. The Jets do have the cards this week. If they were going to win a game, this would probably be one I'd circle that they theoretically have a chance, but I assume the Cards are fighting for a playoff spot here, so they aren't going to take this game lightly. And if they have freebie wins, this is one they need to take up on. Anything you want to touch on this game?
No, everything I had to say about the Jets, I've said pretty much every opening of the podcast this season, and
every worst.
yeah, that's all I have to say about them at this point.
All right, we'll move off that game pretty quick. Baltimore went to the Washington football team and won 31-17. Not much together other than Dwayne Haskins is getting benched, which it doesn't come as too much of a shock. He's just not a good quarterback, and the Ravens sort of snoozed their way through victory here. I don't know if Alex Smith is going to get a shot, but I'm sort of hoping he does get a shot. I don't know if it makes him that much better, because I don't know that Washington has too many skill guys, but it would be fun to see Alex Smith get a shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they have a lot of weapons, and that's partly why I feel so bad saying that Haskins is not good, because he really doesn't have any weapons to throw to, and it makes it hard to play that position when you're basically trying to do everything yourself. As a quarterback, you can't catch passes, you can't run the ball. I mean, you can, but you know what I mean. You need weapons, and unfortunately, he doesn't have them. But his play has been bad also, so you can't excuse not having weapons for some of the decisions that he's made.
Yeah, I think the decision making it never seems to improve. It's always bad decisions and throws that are just into coverages that you're like, what are you seeing here?
Yeah. And as far as Baltimore is concerned, everybody expected them to win big. The line on this game was pretty huge, and I think they might have covered. I'm not sure.
3-14. Yeah, they just hit the cover.
Yeah, so I mean they covered the line, but I think the most impressive thing about that game and the Ravens in general was Lamar Jackson, and kind of showing, because it was kind of tight early on in that game until he started using his legs. And it goes back to my point of thinking that if Baltimore tends to do more of what they did last season and running Lamar Jackson, I understand you want to keep him healthy because he's the future, but he also became the future because of what he put out on the field, and that was running the ball and throwing the ball and play action and all these different things they could do because of his athleticism. I feel like they should let him do more of that this season, and they'll probably be better off in the long run.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe they'll start to let him run a little bit more. But I just I can't gauge much from Baltimore here. You're going to gauge really Baltimore. They'll win regular season games. You're going to gauge Baltimore in the playoffs and if they can win playoff games with that type of offense. So let's move on. Pretty good game. The San Diego Chargers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won 38-31, but Chargers looked pretty good. They let Tampa Bay come back. Brady looked, I'd say, solid. This was probably the best game I'd seen him play all year. But the Chargers also let them back in the game, and the rookie started out real well, Justin Herbert, but then once the pressure started to get on him, they sort of folded.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this on the last show. We said that defense was probably a bit too much for the rookie, and I have to come out and say it that I was really impressed with his play. I saw one particular pass. I believe it was like a 50-yard pass. When 50 yards in the air, it was like a 55-yard pass for a touchdown. He threw it exactly where he needed to throw it. His accuracy was spot on, and early on in that game, he looked really good. But like you said, once the pressure of that D-line started getting to him, it really kind of changed the pace of the game.
Yeah, but also they lost Austin Eckler, I think, in the first quarter of that game.
Yeah, that was big.
So, I thought they played pretty well. I don't think the Chargers are contenders for a playoff spot, but they at least seem to be moving in the upward direction, I think, in a year or two, if Herbert continues to sort of improve and become a dominant quarterback in this league. And basically, if they get their defensive guys healthy, they're without Darwin James and now Melvin Ingram on the defensive side of the ball, which, is probably two of the top 20 players in the league on the defensive side of the ball. So an interesting game. I'm curious about this Thursday game with Tampa Bay and Chicago. I think that'll be more of a litmus test of where Tampa Bay is. I think, Chicago's defense will put some pressure on him, and we'll see if, Chicago can garner some offense, because Nick Foles, once again, did not look great, as per Nick Foles never looks great except when he's coming in as a backup quarterback.
Yeah. And I think as far as the Bucs go, they really, really do have to get Gronk going. He's a difference maker. He hasn't been
especially
in a while.
now that OJ Howard blew out his Achilles. So
maybe this garners him some more attention. I don't know, but if they can get at least a snippet of that Gronk Brady magic that they had back in New England, they could be a pretty decent team.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, the Seattle Seahawks played the Miami Dolphins. And Seahawks won 31-23. This sort of I treat in the same way as the Baltimore Ravens. Seahawks went down there, took care of business. The only thing is you're starting to hear Tua whispers. Ryan didn't look great this week. So how many weeks do you think before Tua starts to get his shot? I thought they wouldn't put him in until about week 10, but the pressure's still sort of already starting to mount there.
Well, because of the injury history with Tua, I think that you continue riding Fitz and that Fitz magic. He didn't play bad. He did pretty good. The game was pretty close early on. It wasn't until the end, towards the end of the game, that the Seahawks really, closed the game. But
yeah,
he was keeping him in there. He made some bad decisions, but he also made some good decisions. And these are the kind of things that, sitting on the sidelines as a rookie, you kind of watch and take in. And it helps you later on once you're actually starting in the game. I think you keep him on the bench a little while longer until you feel the need, like, okay, either we're completely done, we got nothing to play for, or, Fitz goes down.
Yeah. Anything to take away from the Seahawks?
No, I just think that once they get their safety back, they'll be even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. The Minnesota Vikings 31, Houston Texans 23. We already went over that game. Our favorite game of the week, the New Orleans Saints 35 versus Detroit Lions 29. This game was fakely closer than it actually was. The Saints pretty much blitzed them, and the Lions do what the Lions do and sort of tacked on a bunch of points in the last 5 minutes of the game. Saints looked back to normal. Lions, I'm on a thin rope of trusting them anymore. What do you think?
I picked them to beat Arizona, and they beat Arizona, and they make me look like I know what I'm talking about, So I'm like, okay, let's go. The Saints, they've got some injuries, and the Lions are riding hot after that win. I'm like, okay, taking the Lions again. And early on, I'm like, yes, I look like a genius.
They still are a very good first quarter team.
Yes, they are. The problem is closing games out, man. They could have won that game if it weren't for a few plays. But I don't know. The Lions, I love to hate them and I hate to love them.
I probably should have looked it up, but I don't know what the Lions are being outscored by in the second and third quarters, but I'm assuming it's by quite a bit.
Well, surprisingly, this game was close in the first quarter, and the second quarter is where it really kind of fell apart.
All right. Anything else? Saints started to look better. I assume Thomas probably be back in a week or two, and this was the first game where their defense started to sort of get pressure on the quarterback and looked a little bit better.
I'll tell you what I liked. I liked the fact that Drew Brees and Sean Payton were able to put together a game plan that included other players. You can't just keep riding little Kamara the entire time.
Yeah, Roquan Smith and Sanders both had pretty good games this week.
Yeah, the thing is that Kamara, he's an explosive player, but he's also a small player. And the more you keep utilizing him, you risk getting him hurt or wearing him down. And where you stand right now, you're in a tight race in the division. So kind of, put together a smart game plan like they did this last game. Wait till your main weapons come back, and then you become the explosive Saints that everyone's used to.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get to our next game, probably I'd say the biggest scoring game of the weekend. The Cleveland Browns beat the Dallas Cowboys 49-38. Was a little shocked by this, especially the way the Browns had sort of were able to rush the ball. Certainly after Nick Chubb goes out, I mean, they were throwing running backs in there who I didn't even know were still in the league or existed, and they were still gashing them. Just a little shocked by how much Cleveland was able to run on the ball. I mean, if you watch the game, Baker wasn't even all that great in the game. It was all rushing, which just stunned me a little bit.
Yeah, if you would have looked at his stats at halftime, I just didn't understand this game. I watched the majority of it until I couldn't watch it anymore. It was infuriating, especially because I really felt that the Cowboys were a much better team than the Browns were. And as a matter of fact, I think I took them in some of our picks. I don't know. I don't even want to talk about it. It's just they left a really bad taste in my mouth. So if you hear me ever picking the Cowboys again, remind me.
Well, they do play the Giants this week, so
yeah, and I don't know.
Where exactly do you put the Cowboys right now?
Their offense is good. They've got really good offense. They got a really good wide receiver. They got a really good slot guy. They have really good running back. They have good quarterback. They have a solid offense. The issue comes with the defense. They can't stop anybody. I heard some stats somewhere that when a quarterback plays the Cowboys defense, their average QBR, the quarterback rating, is higher than your boy. I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
That's all right.
Your boy Patrick Mahomes'
career
QBR. That's how in awe I am that I'm drawing blanks on the most explosive player in the NFL right now.
I think you're saying everyone add Daniel Jones to your fantasy team this week.
Potential for an upset special here.
If I told you San Francisco, Tampa Bay, would you take the Cowboys over either one of those?
No.
Okay.
No.
Let's go to the Cleveland side of it. They're now 3-1. Impressive start, but I'm not totally buying it. This was probably their most impressive game all season, but like I said, Baker wasn't all that great. I wasn't overwhelmed. Odell finally showed up, but I just don't know quite where to put Cleveland in this mix. They have a game versus Indy this week. I think that'll probably tell us pretty much all we need to know. What are your takes on Cleveland so far?
Yeah, they go from playing probably the worst defense in the NFL this year to playing probably the best defense. So I think this week's going to be very telling. The Browns, I'm not sold on them. Part of the reason why they won this game and looked halfway decent is because how bad the Cowboys defense really is. But I was on their bandwagon early on thinking that they had the tools and the players to make some noise, but I'm not sold on them anymore. I'm off that wagon, and I really don't think they're as good as this score shows they are.
Yeah, I agree. I might change my mind if they can at least play well versus Indy. If they play well versus Indy, I'll believe that they can at least sort of hang with the upper echelon of the AFC.
Just a heads up, that's what happened to me.
I didn't say I was taking them. All right. Probably the dud game of the week. The Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals won 33-25. Cincy played okay. Jacksonville played okay. Both defenses are not very good, and that's pretty much all I could take from the game. Anything you spotted in that game that made you interested?
The only thing I took from this game as a positive was Joe Mixon. He played an outstanding game, but everything else, I felt like Jacksonville should have won this game.
Yeah.
They were poised to take this win, and they came out and disappointed. And kudos to the Bengals. I thought they were going to lose this game, but they came out and they beat a bad team like they probably should have, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what to take. I am thinking about starting a petition to bench Joe Burrow this week versus the Ravens to save his life. For the love of God, do not put that quarterback behind that line and get him murdered versus the Ravens. But
this could be his last week. This could be his last week.
That scares me a tad, but I guess good win for the Bengals. Nice to get their first win of the season. They're now 1-0-1 over the last two games, so I guess that's exciting. All right, moving on. The Arizona Cardinals at the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers won 31-21. The Carolina Panthers continue to impress me. I mean, they aren't world beaters, but they play hard. Their offense is solid even without Christian McCaffrey back there, and I just like the way they play. I don't think they're going to fight for a playoff spot. I think they'll lose games to anybody who's a solid team. Pretty disappointed in Arizona. I think we both, when they started 2-0, sort of thought they might be a little bit of a fraudulent 2-0 team, but I thought they could go in there and at least beat Carolina, and Carolina pretty much rolled them that whole game.
Yeah, like I said, I thought they were definitely a fake undefeated team when they were 2-0, and that's the reason why I took the Lions to beat them in week 3, which happened. Now, for this game, I still thought they were better than the Panthers, and I thought they would win this game. I was really disappointed with Kyler Murray's performance. At halftime, he had like under 60 yards, I think. The stats, obviously, at the end of the game, tell a different story, but that entire first half, he was just really, really bad. And the Panthers, they surprised me. Ever since McCaffrey went down, I thought that they weren't going to be any good, and I believe they're 2-0 without him.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they've like you said, they're a gritty team. I don't think that they're going to dominate any of the elites, but they're gritty enough to give a good team a good fight.
They're well organized, and they play smart football. Now, I don't know, they don't have a lot of skills, position guys. Their receivers are good, not great. the running backs right now are okay, not great. And Teddy Bridgewater is sort of good, not great. And their defense is actually a little bit better than I thought it was. A lot of credit to Matt Rule, and that might come into play later in the show. Next up, the New York Giants at the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams won 17-9. I watched this game, and I can't tell you how disappointed offensively I was and how the Rams play, especially coming off that Buffalo game where I gave them a lot of credit for fighting back, and their offense seemed to look good. It looked good for about 2 weeks since that Cowboys game, and was just pretty disappointed in the way they played this week. Now, some of that might have been travel. Some of that might have been you're playing the New York Giants. Let's not go all out here, but you should be putting up 25 points at least on the New York Giants.
Yeah, that was another game that had a really high spread, and they just looked horrible. And I told you this prior to this game, sometime in the middle of the week, that to me the Rams tend to be a Jekyll and Hyde type of team. They play up to their opponents. If they play a bad team, they play a bad game. If they play a good team, they play a pretty good game. You know, somehow they're 3-1 right now, but you look at those wins, Philadelphia, you know, not that great.
No.
Dallas, I gave you that stat of their defense earlier.
Yes.
You know, and now the Giants. I mean, this game, I was more impressed.
Well, if you could switch them to the NFC East, they would be in first place.
Oh, yeah. This is the thing about the Rams, is that I was more impressed with the Rams in that loss last week against Buffalo than I was in this win versus New York. I felt like the first half was going to be close, and it was close. I believe it was 10-6 at halftime.
Yes, I think so.
You know, and then I thought that they would steamroll. They tend to be a better second half team, which is usually why, even if they're losing, I still think they have a shot of winning, because Sean McVay is really good at kind of cleaning up the mistakes that they make in the first half and adjusting to the game plan of the opposing team. So I really thought they would roll the second half. And if it wasn't for that 150-yard Cooper Kupp pass where, you know, he went straight down the seams, which, by the way, was a really good play.
Yes.
If it wasn't for that play, I mean, Goff ends up with, like 150 yards passing against the New York Giants.
I hadn't touched on how bad Goff was other than that 55-yard play to Kupp. But
yeah, and he started off really hot.
Yeah.
Like that first series, he looked really good. You know, the offense looked like it was getting ready to steamroll, and something happened. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Pretty disappointing, but I'll mark it off as travel and just a bad opponent, and we'll see what they can sort of pop up with next week and see if they improve on that. Next up, we have the Buffalo Bills at the Oakland Raiders. Buffalo Bills won 30-23. Pretty easy game, actually, for Buffalo. They sort of went in there, handled their business. Oakland was a little plucky offensively, but Buffalo just had too much on both offensive and defensive. Nice win by Buffalo, but nothing too shocking, I thought.
Yeah, this Las Vegas Raiders team reminds me to the Oakland Raiders team of a couple seasons ago.
I wrote down Oakland Raiders on my sheet.
You know, we're gonna have to start a little pot where every time we get something wrong, we throw some cash in there, and then at the end of the week, someone gets to enjoy it. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, I might start by not writing the wrong city down on my sheet as I read it.
It's okay. It's the first season, so you know you get it passed. But the Raiders remind me of the Raiders of a couple seasons ago when they were a playoff-bound team. You know, they're pretty good enough to win games, but they're really bad at times and make some poor decisions. And I think this is looking more and more like an 8-8 team. And, you know, the Bills are a good team. And I kind of said on the last show that I thought Buffalo would win this game just because they were better. And that's all I can really
that was a good
say about this game.
All right, moving on. Indianapolis Colts 19 versus Chicago Bears 11. Indy's defense just smothered the bad Bears offense. I thought the Bears defense played pretty well, but Indianapolis seemed in control of the game the whole time. Indy keeps getting better. Chicago seems to be getting worse week to week. I don't know that Foles is all that much better of a quarterback than Mitch Trubisky. I mean, he might know the offense better, but he's not able to execute throws and stuff. So I don't know really what to make of the Bears. Impressed by the Colts. What did you think?
Yeah, the Colts defense continues to impress. They do a lot of things really well. And as long as the offense manages the game and doesn't make any bonehead moves, they're probably going to win games. And this Bear offense, I feel like, is probably better with Nick Foles at the helm. But he doesn't play, like you say, he doesn't play as well as he does when he comes in as a backup. So I think I figured out the solution for this team. What they have to do is they have to start Trubisky, bring in Foles for the second and third quarter. And if you're losing, you bring Trubisky back in the fourth, for one of those Trubisky magical comebacks. And that's how you're going to win every single game.
Well, we'll see if they employ that strategy coming up. All right, moving on. Big game on Sunday night. The Philadelphia Eagles 25, the San Francisco 49ers 20. The Eagles pretty much had to have the win. They are now in first place due to their tie. San Francisco didn't look great. Nick Mullins wasn't great. I didn't understand changing quarterbacks. I didn't think it was so bad he got benched, but good win for the Eagles. I still don't know how much I trust them. The defense looked better than it had most of the year. The offense still is a large work in progress.
Yeah, as far as the Eagles are concerned, you expected them to win this game. We expected them to win this game. I know a lot of people still had the 49ers winning, but we thought that it was about time that those injuries started to kind of take effect, and they definitely showed. I didn't understand the benching either. I didn't think the quarterback play was really that bad. But overall, the Eagles did get the win and it puts them in first place. Not much to celebrate because I think that with the players that they have, minus the players the 49ers are missing, they should have easily won that game, and it was a lot closer than it should have been.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving off the two Monday night games, the New England Patriots went to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs won 26-10. I don't know what to gauge much from this game. The Patriots didn't have Cam Newton in there. I thought their defense, had a good game plan, what you expect from Bill Belichick, but you just can't hold the Chiefs down for, 4 quarters. They got their points, and there was really no way for New England to score. So I don't take really anything from this game until, Cam comes back.
I was really excited about this game. I was looking forward to it. Unfortunately, that was before we heard about the positive COVID test results for Cam Newton. Obviously, it changed the trajectory of this game. Had to be rescheduled, and even with the rescheduling, I didn't think it was going to make much of a difference. The talent drop off was huge once you lost the quarterback. And as far as the Chiefs are concerned, I mean, they're a good team, and we kind of expect them to keep playing well. So nothing really to take away from this game.
Yeah, next up on Monday Night Football, Atlanta Falcons at the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay Packers won 30-16. Once again, not much to take. Atlanta's bad. Green Bay's good. Green Bay went in there, took care of business. Atlanta continues. They at least didn't get up and blow a lead this game, but they're nowhere near the level of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, all I can really say about this game is I thought that Atlanta's offense would come out a little bit more explosive. It's understandable that they didn't with the injuries that they had to Julio Jones, and they were some of their key pieces were banged up going into the game, so it's understandable that they weren't as explosive. I feel like Todd Gurley is slowly getting a little more play time, and he's looking a little bit more like Todd Gurley that we were used to seeing. He's still not quite the same, and I don't think he'll ever quite be the same. But overall, Yeah, like you said, the Falcons are bad, Packers are good, and
Yeah.
Packers rolled.
All right, so that's our week 4 recap for the week. Now let's get into our best and worst of the week.
You had one hell of a game.
All right, we'll start off on the offensive end for my best players of the week. Delvin Cook, he continues to just get better week by week, and really that Vikings offense pretty much just completely revolves around him. And honestly, right now, I think he's probably the best running back in the league, especially with Christian McCaffrey hurt. And then I also had honorable mentions to Odell Beckham Jr. He had a big game, rushing and receiving, and explosive plays, which, you know, if you got it every week from him, the Cleveland Browns might be a little better. And Aaron Rodgers, who just has been great all season long. What do you have for best of the week?
For best of the week, I actually gave the nod to George Kittle, who had a big game, even with the swapping quarterbacks. He had 15 catches for 183 yards and a touchdown. With the offensive weapons missing on that team, you would expect him to be a key focus of the defense, and yet he still manages to put up big numbers like that. So he got my nod this time, with an honorable mention for Joe Mixon, who had 25 carries for 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also Cook, who torched the Texans.
Yeah. On the defensive end, I had Darius Smith for the Green Bay Packers. He was just in the backfield all day long. Really liked the way he played versus the Falcons, caused Matt Ryan a lot of trouble, had a couple sacks in that game. And then Aaron Donald, who probably should just be on the list permanently. I pretty much think he's the reason they won the game, because they couldn't block him, and they needed every point they could since they didn't really score. I really like the way Aaron Donald played. What did you have for the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, for the defensive side, I also had Aaron Donald. I feel like he's such a big part of that defense. That defense goes as he goes. He was kind of quiet to start off the game, and then he got into a little confrontation with one of the offensive linemen, and that kind of set him off. And from that moment on, he just started disrupting everything back there. But I also wanted to give an honorable mention to Darius Williams, who just seems to be making plays defensively. I believe this was the second time he picked off a pass, either in the end zone or right near the end zone to close out a game. So I thought I'd give him a nod too.
Yeah, good call. My coach of the week was Matt Rule. We already went over it, but I really like the way Carolina's played. I've thought they've been organized and disciplined all year. They don't have the talent of, a lot of the teams, and just thought they played well, and really like the way they played on a 2-game winning streak now. And, theoretically, they're in contention for a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, for best coach, I had Sean Payton from the New Orleans Saints. I just felt like he did a really good job putting a game plan together that didn't heavily rely on Alvin Kamara, especially with his big wide receiver out, probably, like you said, for another week at least. So I thought that he probably put together the best game plan to get a win and stay in the race for that division.
All right, good call. Now let's move on to our worst of the week.
Terrible. Just terrible.
All right, so I got a couple offensive guys for worst of the week. Deshaun Watson, that's probably one of the worst games I'd seen him play. He had a few, throws down the stretch to make the game closer than it seemed. But he looked off, he looked, rattled, and it was just a bad game I thought he played. And also on there, I have the New England combo quarterbacks. They're just bad, really bad. And you see why they went out and had to get Cam.
Yeah, you can definitely tell why they had to get him, as many people thought that Cam was going to have a bad season. It's just showing how much better he is than what they had right there. But for worst of the week, I went with Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals. Like I said, if you look at the stats for that game, they don't tell the whole story. That first half was atrocious. He ended up having 54 yards on 13 completions. And if it wasn't for Carolina's defense kind of taking their foot off the gas, he probably would have stayed under 100 yards for the entire game.
Yeah, good call there. All right, on the defensive side, I had the Arizona Cardinals, and specifically Devondre Campbell. He's taking my spot for Isaiah Simmons, who I think should be getting in there, the Clemson rookie. So I just didn't like the way the Cardinals played, and I didn't like the way that linebacker played, who's, blocking Isaiah Simmons, who I think could be a real game wrecker. Love the way he played during his career at Clemson, and I just like Simmons to get more snaps. So that was my defensive worst of the week.
Yeah, for defensive worst of the week, I ended up going with the entire Dallas Cowboys team.
We can't do them every week.
We had this conversation about the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets. It wasn't about the Cowboys. I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, and I am, except that instead of Falcons or Jets, I'm saying Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. Cowboys definitely were in there.
They're atrocious, man. I think they've given up like 146 points or something like that. It's really, really bad, man. They're a bad team.
All right. So my coaches, I got two. I got Mike McCarthy for the Dallas Cowboys. I took them instead of the whole defense. They're a disgrace right now. If you had Jason Garrett in there, they would still be 1-3, possibly have a better record. And the way he left Green Bay, I don't really know how good a coach he is, because Green Bay now the last 2 years is probably going to be the top record team in the NFC. So I'm a little hesitant to see how good Mike McCarthy is. And my other one is Charles Nagy, the Chicago Bears coach. They have no offense, and he's supposed to be the offensive genius under Andy Reid, and the only genius is Andy Reid, not Charles Nagy.
We kind of see this pattern go on with our worst of the week when it comes to coaches. It tends to usually be somebody who's brought in because they're either an offensive guru or they're a defensive genius or whatever it may be, Dan Quinn. But for my worst coaches, I have also Mike McCarthy. I feel like he did a really poor job with the entire team as far as preparation goes. He's got what a lot of people predicted at the beginning of the season to be at least a playoff contender, and he's making them look really, really bad, like potentially a last place team. Fortunately for him, he is in the NFC East. But also on my worst coach list, I had the departing Bill O'Brien on there. He had a really tough schedule to start off the season, but he didn't show much of anything. And this last week was a game that they were supposed to win against a winless Minnesota Vikings team, and they just couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't pull anything off, and they looked really, really bad. So those are my two worst coaches for the week.
Yeah, good call. It must have been a bad coaching week since we both had two coaches on the bad coaching list. All right, that's our show for this week. Be sure to come back Friday or Saturday for our picks podcast. Alex, anything you want to plug before we sign out of here?
No, just the same old, same old. Follow me on Twitter. I did a little giveaway this last week, and I might do some more going forward depending on how my Rams play.
All right, that's our show for this week, and we're out.